Hi class, back again, but now with a video for for loops. Now, if you watch the videos, like I asked you to do in Khan Academy, you would see that the for loop is essentially, it's a special case of a while loop. So anything you can do in a for loop, you can do in a while loop. You can do it the other way around, but there's just a little bit of overhead. So if you recall back to, let's say, the while loop, here we had to define variables. We call that declare and initialize. And we had to increment them, and we have a Boolean condition. So initialize variables, Boolean condition, and the change, or the increment or decrement the variable. So if you look here, we initialize a variable, we have a Boolean condition, and we increase or decrease the value. The nice thing about a for loop is it's all in one line. Now, something important to remember is that this number 3, this always occurs as the last line of code in your loop. So picture that as happening. This is your Boolean condition, and it happens each time through the loop. This initializing a variable only happens once. So this only happens once. That's an H. Only happens once. This is always at the beginning of the loop, just like in a while loop. And this is always the last line in the loop. Last thing that happens in the loop. And we'll do a trace on this to show you. So here's an example, but taking out, sort of changing, okay, so if it was a while loop, we would have this initialization. Well, it's been replaced here. Then you would have a Boolean condition. Well, that's replaced here. And then you would have this increment, but that's replaced here. So it's all sort of the for loop just sort of summarizes it all in one line. Now what I did is in Khan Academy, I typed up a somewhat similar example, but not totally the same. I'll go over it and then we'll trace it. So you look here. So for, I initialize a variable y to 0. I check, well, is y less than 20? If it is, then draw this line. So it's basically, it's a horizontal line that crosses the screen. So it's going from x0 to y to x400 at y. And then each time, what does this mean? That means I add 1 to y. So we can change this. It doesn't always have to be 1. I could say, let's say y equals y plus 5. And then you can see, if we think of 0 and then 5, 10, 15, 20, you would have 4 lines. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. If we change this to 200, then you can see you have more lines drawn. We could change this to 3, and then they're closer together. So you see maybe the idea of what's happening there. So let's say I change this back to 20 so I can trace it nicely. I'm going to pause and cut and paste this code over to my writing board. Alright, so if we look at this code and we make that trace table that I talked about in the previous video. Oh, just a moment. Hi there, sorry for the interruption. So we have the variable that's being defined is y, and that's defined and initialized in this for loop header, and it only happens once. So we have the value of y is initially 0. We see our Boolean condition is checking, well, is y less than 20? Well, yes, 0 is less than 20. So what happens next? So this happens only once. This happens next, and then this line occurs. So it draws the line from x to whatever this y is, to this point, x2, y In this case, it's the same y. So it's going to draw it from 0 to 400 at y equals 0. So it draws it across there. Yes. And then the last thing that happens in that loop is this, because remember, this happens as the last line of the code. So we add 3. So y becomes 3 now. So that means the next thing that happens, so this only happens once. So this doesn't happen again. Only happens once. Next thing that happens is this line. Is 3 less than 20? Yes, it is. So we go into the loop. Now we draw the line at 0, 3, 403. So we get the next line across. And a good question on a quiz would be, how many lines are drawn? And then we add 3 more. So now we get 6. 6 is less than 20. I'm not going to change it to line mode. We draw another line at from 0, 6 to 406. And then we add 3 more. 9 is still less than 20. We draw another line across, add 3. So we've got 12. So you can start to see how many lines, 12, and then we've got 15, 18. And then when y becomes 21, what happens is 21 is no longer less than 20, so it stops. So this is how many lines are drawn. How many lines? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines are drawn. Yes. Does this make sense? I hope it makes sense. And again, it's practice. When you're programming, you've got to practice. And if we go back here, important things to remember. Good way to repeat code. Don't put a semicolon at the end of the closing curly bracket like we do with the draw function. Make sure your Boolean condition will eventually be false. Otherwise, you'll get what's called an infinite loop. And that's explained in the videos as well on Khan Academy. So if I go back here, because I know a lot of students like to see, some special effects. So let's say, for example, we've got this for loop. And if we have, let's say, y plus or y less than 400, we've got all these lines across. And a lot of times people have asked, oh, can I do like maybe water that changes color or a sunset or something? So if we look here, we could do, let's say, var, let's say r equals 0, red, green, and blue. G equals 0, blue. I'm going to show some effects we could do. Just a moment. All right, so I just played around with some numbers because I had to refresh my mind on sort of what the sunset would look like. So let's say, for example, here I have RGB as variables. So then I could say, remember, if it's a line, it's not fill, it's stroke. So I would say, let's say stroke, and I would say RGB. So that's that combination. But what happens if I reduce the contribution of red each time? I could say, let's say R, but not too much, because remember the smallest R value, or any color value, is 0, and the largest is 255. So I want to, let's say, go down by a half. So if I say R minus 0.5. So it's sort of the stuff you've seen in the draw function. So right now you still don't really see much of a difference. So let's say instead of plus 3, I say plus 1. See that gradual change now? And if you change these values, and I could even say here, let's say blue, green equals, let's say green minus 0.2. And it goes down even. I could just playing with the color, and you get this gradual look. So it's something to play with and easily done using loops. Oops. Yes. So I hope this helps, and I hope you're inspired. So my next video will help you get started on your culminating.